I still remember that morning like it happened 5 minutes ago. The air in the living room was soft with sunlight, the kind that filters through old curtains and paints everything in memories. I had just finished setting 2 cups of tea on the table, one for me and one for my son, Arav. It was our small ritual since he was a boy. No matter how busy he got, he always had tea with me before heading out, or at least he used to. That morning, I heard the doorbell ring. My heart lifted. He hadn't come home for 2 weeks, and I missed him like a mother misses her heartbeat. I hurried to open the door, smoothing the wrinkles on my old sari. He stood there tall, handsome, but not quite the same boy I'd raised. His smile didn't reach his eyes anymore. And beside him, she stood. His girlfriend, Mira, I'd met her once before. Beautiful, poised, the kind of girl who seemed to belong in another world, not ours. I smiled, nervous but trying. Arav, you came early, and Mira Beta come in. They stepped inside, and for a brief moment I felt warmth again. I poured the tea, set the plates, tried to start small talk, but something was off. Arav wasn't speaking much. Mira kept glancing at him before answering my questions like she needed permission. Then, after a few awkward minutes, I asked the question I'd been waiting to ask for months. So, when is the wedding? I'll start the preparations. We'll invite the whole family. You both must have thought of a date, right? I looked at Mira, expecting that shy smile, the kind brides give when they imagine their big day. Instead, she placed her cup down, looked straight into my eyes, and said, calmly, almost casually, "We got married yesterday." The words hit me like a slap. My hands froze midair, tea spilling onto the saucer. For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. My eyes darted to Arav. He didn't speak. He just looked down, guilt written all over his face. What did you say?" My voice cracked. She repeated, a bit firmer this time, "We got married yesterday, just a simple court ceremony. We didn't want a big function." I turned to my son, my voice trembling. "Arav, is this true?" He nodded, eyes still lowered. "Yes, Ma, it just happened suddenly. We didn't want to trouble anyone." Trouble anyone? I stared at him, my own son, the boy who once held my hand on rainy walks, who once promised he'd never hide anything from me, now standing there married, and I was the last person to know. I wanted to speak, but my throat closed up. The room felt smaller. My heart beat so hard I thought everyone could hear it. Mira's voice sliced through the silence again. "It's done, Auntie. Please understand. We just wanted it simple." Simple. As if years of my love, prayers, and sacrifices could be summarized in one word: simple. I don't even remember what I said after that. I think I just nodded, pretending to understand, pretending I wasn't breaking inside. I didn't want to cry in front of them. Mothers don't cry in front of their children, we break quietly, in corners where no one looks. After they left, I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty cups on the table. One cup was still full, Arav's. The steam had died, but the pain hadn't. And that's how the story really began. If I close my eyes, I can still see the years that brought us there, the years when it was just the two of us. Arav was only 6 when my husband passed away. A car accident on a rainy night, a call that changed everything. From that night, I became both mother and father. I didn't have much, but I had my boy. My reason, my pride, my heartbeat. We lived in a small rented apartment in Delhi. The ceiling leaked during monsoons, and sometimes we'd have to place buckets under the drips. But even those nights were full of laughter. I'd tell him bedtime stories, and he'd make up endings of his own, wild, impossible ones. He'd say, "One day, Ma, I'll buy you a house with no leaks, no rent, and a balcony full of flowers." And I believed him. I worked double shifts at a school as an administrator. Some days, I skipped lunch to save for his books. Other days, I stitched neighbors' clothes at night for extra income. Every thread, every coin, every sleepless night, it all went into his future. I wanted him to have everything I couldn't. When he got his scholarship to a university abroad, I cried like I'd been given the world. That day, he hugged me tight and said, "Ma, this is just the start. I'll make you proud." He did too. Every phone call, every message. He'd tell me how classes were going, how he was cooking noodles that almost taste like home. I'd sit by the phone every night waiting for his voice. Until slowly, those calls became shorter. Then fewer. Then distant. When I asked, he said he was just busy. I wanted to believe him. A mother always wants to believe her son. But my heart knew something was changing. The first time he mentioned Mira, I was thrilled. He sounded happy, truly happy. He sent me her photo, and I remember smiling through tears. "She's lovely," I told him. "Bring her home when you can." Months later, they came. That first meeting, I still remember every second. She was polite, yes, but her eyes didn't soften when she looked at me. She addressed me as Auntie, even after Arav corrected her twice. There was distance, polite distance, like she was already guarding herself from me. Still, I tried. I asked her favorite foods, her family background, her dreams. She answered briefly, smiling just enough to end each question. Arav kept glancing at her, nervous, like a child trying to keep two worlds from colliding. That night, after they left, I stayed awake for hours, replaying every moment. I told myself I was just overthinking, that love changes people, that he was growing up. That's what I told myself. But deep down, a quiet fear began to grow, the fear that I was losing my son, inch by inch. A few months later, I noticed he stopped visiting home alone. Every visit, Mira came along. Not that I minded, I wanted to know her better. But it always felt like there was a wall between us now. One Sunday, I cooked his favorite meal, rajma chawal and kheer, the one he used to beg for as a boy. I waited since morning. He said he'd come for lunch. The clock ticked past noon, then 2, then 5. No call, no message. When he finally called around 7, he said, "Sorry, Ma, we got caught up with some friends. I'll come next week." Next week never came. I remember sitting alone that night, the smell of cold food around me, tears I didn't want to admit were falling. Mothers don't expect repayment. We only hope not to be forgot. But that's the cruel thing about love, it doesn't vanish all at once. It fades quietly, like light slipping out of a room while you're not looking. The months that followed were a blur of waiting and silence. He'd call sometimes, quick conversations, updates about work, the weather, never about us. I told myself it was enough. But every time the phone rang, my heart hoped it would be more. Then came the day he said, "Ma, Mira and I are planning to get married." Those words filled me with joy again. I smiled through happy tears. I began dreaming of decorations, saris, relatives, music, the noise of family after years of quiet. I even started writing a list, what food to cook, who to invite, how to decorate the house. I waited for details, but he never gave them. "We're still figuring it out," he'd say. Until that morning, the morning that broke me. When Mira said, "We got married yesterday," I didn't just lose a moment, I lost a lifetime. I didn't shout, I didn't ask why, I didn't want to embarrass my son. I just smiled, the kind of smile that hides all the pain behind it. The kind that says, "I understand, even when you don't." When they left, I stood at the window, watching them walk away. Arav opened the car door for her, his hand on her back, gentle, protective. I should have been happy for him, but all I could think was that hand used to hold mine. That night, I went into his old room. The bed was neatly made, just as I'd left it. On the wall, his childhood drawings still hung, crooked houses, stick figures, one picture of me holding his hand with the words written in messy crayons. "Me and Ma, always. Always." I sat there, holding that frame, and for the first time in years, I cried like a child. Not because he got married, but because he didn't need me anymore. And as I sat there in the quiet, I realized something. It isn't betrayal that hurts the most. It's being replaced in someone's world without even being told. That night, the silence in the house felt louder than ever. I kept waiting for the sound of his footsteps, the door opening, his voice saying, "Ma." But the only thing that came was the echo of my own heart, whispering into the emptiness. When did my son stop being mine? After that day, something inside me changed. It wasn't just heartbreak, it was silence. The kind that doesn't scream, doesn't beg, doesn't demand to be heard. It just lives quietly inside you, like a ghost that never leaves. I tried to convince myself that it was okay. That maybe they had their reasons. That maybe my son didn't want to burden me with wedding expenses. That maybe, in his own way, he was protecting me. But the truth was much harder to swallow. He stopped calling as often. Before, he'd call every Sunday evening, no matter what. I used to plan my Sundays around that call, finish all chores, make myself tea, and sit by the phone waiting for it to ring. After the marriage, weeks passed in silence. I would glance at the clock every night around 9, remembering his voice, his laughter. But the phone stayed still. No ringtone, no message, just quiet. One night, I finally couldn't take it anymore. I dialed his number. It rang twice before he picked up. "Hello, Ma," he said softly. My heart clenched at the sound of that word. "Arev, it's been so long. How are you, Beta?" "I'm fine, Ma, just busy. Work been crazy." "And Mira, how is she?" "She's good, she's settling in." Settling in? Like she was adjusting to a new apartment, not to a family she'd entered without a word to me. I swallowed my pain and smiled through my voice. "Tell her I said hello." "I will. Listen, Ma, I'll come visit soon, okay? Maybe next month." Next month, always next month, always later, always someday. "Of course," I said, pretending not to notice the distance in his tone. "Just take care of yourself." After hanging up, I sat in the dark, holding the phone to my chest. The screen still showed his name, glowing faintly like a memory that refused to fade. In the weeks that followed, I tried to move on. I cleaned his room, folded his old clothes, and told myself he was building his own life. That's what every mother dreams of, right? For her child to stand on his own feet, to find love, to be happy. But no one tells you that when your child builds his own life, sometimes there's no space left for you in it. Then one Sunday, the doorbell rang again. My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened the door, there they were, Arev and Mira, standing together. She looked as graceful as ever, her hair tied neatly, a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Surprise, Ma," Arev said with that boyish grin I used to love. I almost cried seeing him again. I hugged him tight. He hesitated for a second before hugging me back. Mira looked uncomfortable, like a guest who didn't want to overstay her welcome. Come in," I said quickly, wiping my eyes. "I'll make lunch." They sat in the living room as I rushed to the kitchen, my hands trembling with excitement. I wanted everything to be perfect. I cooked his favorite dishes, paneer butter masala, jeera rice, and gulab jamuns. The aroma filled the house, reminding me of better days. When I finally brought the food out, Arev smiled. "Ma, you didn't have to do all this." "I wanted to," I said softly. "It's been so long." As we ate, I tried to talk, to ask about his job, their new apartment, their plans. But every question felt like I was walking on glass. Mira answered politely, but her tone stayed distant. Arev kept glancing at her before replying, as if seeking silent approval. At one point I asked, "Do you have any wedding photos? I'd love to see them." The air froze for a second. Mira exchanged a glance with Arev, then she smiled politely. "We didn't really take many. It was just a court thing, nothing fancy." "Oh," I tried to sound casual. "Still, a photo or two would be lovely." She looked away. "Maybe next time, Auntie." That word, auntie, stabbed harder than I expected. My own son's wife, and I was just another auntie. Not Ma, not even Mummy, just a stranger with an address. After lunch, as they prepared to leave, I tried to hold back tears. "You'll come again soon, won't you?" Arev nodded. "Of course, Ma, we'll come next weekend." But they didn't. The months blurred together after that. Arev called less and less. Mira never called at all. Festivals passed quietly. On Diwali, I lit diyas alone, placing one by the photo of my late husband. I whispered, "He's married now, you'd be proud of him." My voice broke halfway through. I just wish he'd told me. A few days later, my neighbor Renew came over. "Did you hear? Your son and daughter-in-law bought a flat near Connaught Place." I froze. "What?" "Yes, my cousin works at the same firm as your son." She said he mentioned it casually. "Oh, how nice. You must be so happy." I forced a smile, nodding. "Yes, very happy." But inside, something shattered again. They'd bought a home, a new beginning, and I hadn't even known. That night, I found myself standing by the window again, staring at the empty street. I remembered the night Arev told me he got his first job, how we'd celebrated with cheap sweets and laughter, how he'd hugged me and said, "Someday, I'll buy you a house, Ma, big enough for both of us." Now he had one, without me. Weeks turned into months. My health began to falter. Nothing major, just exhaustion, back pain, sleepless nights. The doctor said it was stress. I laughed bitterly. If only he knew how heavy silence could feel. One morning, Arif called out of the blue. "Ma, we're coming over tonight." For a moment I couldn't breathe. Really? That's wonderful. I spent the whole day cleaning, cooking, and even ironing the sari he'd once said was his favorite on me. When they arrived that evening, Mira looked stunning, dressed in an elegant blue kurta. Arav looked tired, distracted. Dinner went well at first. But then, halfway through, I made the mistake of asking, "So, when do I get to visit your new house?" They both froze. Arav cleared his throat. It's not ready yet, Ma, still setting things up." Mira gave a small, tight smile. "It's very small, Auntie. You wouldn't be comfortable." Her words stung. I smiled weakly. "I don't need comfort, Beta. I just want to see where you both live." "We'll call you when it's ready," Arav said quickly. That was the end of it. The rest of the dinner was filled with forced smiles and empty talk. When they left, I stood at the gate watching their car disappear into the distance, my chest aching. A few days later, I saw a photo online. My neighbor's niece had posted a picture from a housewarming party. Arav and Mira stood in the corner, smiling, cutting a cake. My son, my only son. He had a housewarming party, and I wasn't even invited. That night, I didn't cry. I just sat in the dark, my hands trembling as I held that photo on my phone. My reflection stared back at me from the black screen after it went dark, tired, hollow, forgotten. The distance between us became a canyon. He'd visit rarely, once every few months maybe. Every time, the visits grew shorter, the conversations thinner. One afternoon, when he finally came alone, I asked quietly, "Arav, do you still love me?" He looked at me startled. "Of course, Ma, why would you even ask that?" I smiled sadly, because love doesn't feel like this anymore. He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Ma, please don't start. You know Mira doesn't like drama." "Drama," I repeated, my voice trembling. "Is that what you call a mother missing her son?" "Ma," he looked frustrated but guilty too. "It's not like that. She just wants her space. She's not very close to family, that's all." "And you," I whispered, "do you want that space too?" He looked down, silence. That silence said everything. That night, I sat by the small lamp in his old room again, reading old letters he'd written from college. One line stood out. "Ma, no matter what happens, you'll always be my home." I ran my fingers over the faded ink, my tears smudging the words further. I wondered when I stopped being home. The next time he came, it was different. He looked tired, restless. Mira wasn't with him. "Ma," he said, sitting down, "things are a bit tense at home." I didn't interrupt, I just listened. "She thinks you don't like her," he continued quietly. "She says you judge her." I was stunned. "Judge her? Arav, I've barely spoken to her." "I know, but she feels uncomfortable. She thinks you don't approve." I laughed bitterly. Did she ever give me a chance to approve? She never asked, never told me. How can I dislike someone I don't even know? He sighed. "Ma, please, I'm just stuck in between. I don't want to choose sides." My heart broke at those words. There are no sides, Arav. There's just family. He didn't reply. He stayed for a short while that day, then left before dinner. I watched him drive away again, the shadow of my son swallowed by distance and decisions I didn't understand. That night I couldn't sleep. The walls felt heavy with memories. Every corner of the house still held traces of him, his laughter, his childish sketches, his promises, but none of them could comfort me anymore. I realized something then. When children grow up, they don't stop loving their parents, they just stop needing them. And sometimes that feels worse. The next morning, I made tea for two again, just out of habit. I placed his cup across the table, the way I used to. Steam rose for a few moments before fatting into nothing. And I whispered to the empty chair, "When did you stop talking to me, my son? When did I become just a part of your past?" The silence didn't answer, but it understood. Days turned into months, and months quietly became years. Yet the silence between us never healed, it only stretched, like a crack that kept widening no matter how gently I tried to patch it. There's something cruel about promises made by those you love. They don't break with noise, they fade quietly, like smoke dissolving in air. And one morning, you wake up realizing all those small, beautiful assurances you held onto were just words. Arav had promised me he would always include me in his biggest moments. He had promised I'd stand beside him when he got married. He had promised that nothing, no one would ever change us. And yet, one by one, those promises slipped through his fingers like sand. It started small in ways that almost seemed harmless. He would cancel visits, saying work had piled up. Then, even when he did visit, he came with Mira, and the conversations would stay locked within polite boundaries. Every time I tried to bring up something emotional, something real, Mira would glance at him, and he'd change the topic. Once, during dinner, I mentioned how quiet the house felt without him. "I was thinking," I said, forcing a smile, "maybe I'll come stay with you for a few days, just to spend time with you both." He froze mid-bite. Mira's smile thinned. "That's sweet, Auntie," she said, her voice smooth but distant, "but our place is quite small right now. Maybe later when we move somewhere bigger." My hands tightened around the plate. "Oh, I see," I whispered. "Of course." Arav didn't say anything. He didn't even look at me. That silence said more than words ever could. Later that night, after they left, I stood by the doorway long after their car disappeared. The food on the table had gone cold again. I had made his favorite dishes, just like always, and once again, I had leftovers and an aching heart for company. One afternoon, I decided to visit his office, not to intrude, just to surprise him. I hadn't seen his workplace, and I thought maybe he'd be happy to see me. I baked him a small box of ladoos, wrapped it neatly, and took the metro, clutching the box like it carried my heart inside. When I reached the office, I asked the receptionist for him. She smiled and said, "Oh, Mr. Kapoor is out for lunch with his wife. Would you like to leave a message?" My heart stopped for a moment. Lunch, with Mira, he hadn't mentioned it when we spoke that morning. "No," I said softly, forcing a smile. "I'll just leave this." I placed the box on the counter, wrote for Arav from Ma on the note, and left. As I walked out, I caught a glimpse of them through the glass window of a nearby cafe. They were sitting close, laughing, their hands intertwined across the table. He looked happy, genuinely happy. And I realized in that instant that the version of him that belonged to me no longer existed. He was someone else now, someone's husband, someone's world. I was just a chapter from before. The next few months became a pattern of polite avoidance. Calls became rare, visits rarer. I learned not to expect. I learned to keep my hopes folded neatly away, like old saris that no longer fit your life, but you can't throw away either. On his first anniversary, I waited for an invitation that never came. No message, no call, nothing. I only found out they'd celebrated through social media, a photo of them cutting a cake, her head resting on his shoulder. The caption read, "1 year of love, laughter, and everything in between." I stared at the photo for hours. That smile on his face, it wasn't mine anymore. It belonged entirely to her. Still, I sent a message. "Happy anniversary, Beta. May you both always stay happy." He replied 3 hours later. "Thanks, Ma." Just that. No heart emoji, no warmth. Just a thanks. That was the moment I truly felt it, the weight of being forgotten by the person you love most. There was another promise he broke, the one that hurt the most. Before his marriage, he had told me, "Ma, no matter where life takes me, I'll always come home for Diwali. You and I will light diyas together like we always do." So that year, I cleaned the house from top to bottom. I decorated the doorway with marigolds, made fresh sweets, even wore the sari he'd once said made me look younger than all the aunties on the street. But he didn't come. At 6 p.m., he called. "Ma, I'm so sorry. We're at Mira's parents' place this year. They insisted. We'll come next time, okay?" Next time. I smiled through the call, pretending not to notice my hands shaking. "Of course, Beta. Enjoy yourself. Give my regards to everyone." After I hung up, I walked to the balcony and lit a single diya. One light, for a house that once glowed with laughter. That night, when the crackers burst outside, I whispered to the dark, "Happy Diwali, Arav." A few weeks later, I fell sick. Just a fever, the doctor said, but when you live alone, even a mild fever feels heavier. The walls seemed to close in, the nights stretch longer. I called him once, but he didn't pick up. I left a message. "I'm just a little under the weather, Beta. Nothing serious." He replied 2 days later. "Sorry, Ma, was in meetings, feeling better." I lied, yes. That's what mothers do. We hide our pain so our children can live freely. One evening, Renew came over again, gossip spilling from her like a leaky tap. Your son and daughter-in-law went to Europe. Honeymoon, I think. I smiled faintly. Oh yes, he mentioned something like that. He hadn't. After she left, I sat staring at the wedding photo I'd printed myself from his social media, one of the few I had. I whispered to the smiling faces, "You didn't even think I'd want to see you off." There's a special kind of loneliness in knowing that life is moving on, just not yours. A few months later, he finally came home, alone again. He looked tired, older somehow. I wanted to hold him, to feed him, to make him tea like I always used to. But the air between us had changed, thick with things unsaid. We talked about random things, work, weather, bills. Until finally I asked, "Do you ever miss home, Arev?" He looked at me startled. "Ma, this is home." "No," I said softly, smiling. "I mean this home, the one you grew up in." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Of course I do, Ma, don't think so much." "Do you remember the rain game?" I asked suddenly. "When we used to sit by the window during monsoon and count lightning strikes?" He smiled faintly. "Yeah, you always lost." I laughed, a small, broken sound. I used to lose on purpose. We both laughed then, but behind the laughter I could feel it, the space between us. The unspoken words, the withheld emotions. The next day, as he was leaving, I finally gathered the courage to ask, "Why didn't you tell me about the wedding, Arev?" He froze halfway to the door. "Ma, please, we've talked about this." "No, we haven't," I said quietly. "You never explained. You just left me out of the most important day of your life." He looked down, guilt flickering in his eyes. "It wasn't like that. It all happened so fast. Mira didn't want a big ceremony. She thought it would be simpler this way." "And you," I whispered, "what did you want?" He didn't answer. My voice trembled. "Did you even think about me that day? Just once?" He finally met my eyes. "I did, every second I did, but I didn't want to hurt you." I smiled bitterly. "You hurt me by pretending not to." He looked away, helpless. "I'm sorry, Ma, I just thought you'd understand." I nodded, my throat tightening. "I do understand, Arev. I understand that love changes, that people change, that promises fade." He wanted to say something, but didn't. He hugged me lightly, the kind of hug that ends too soon, and left. When the door closed behind him, I sank to the floor, my tears finally breaking free. It wasn't anger that consumed me. It was grief. Grief for the boy I once knew, for the bond we once had, for the promises we once believed in. That night, I opened his old cupboard again. His childhood drawings, his report cards, his notes, they were all still there. Among them, I found an old birthday card he'd made for me when he was 10. It said, "Ma, you are my world. I'll never let you feel alone." I traced those words with my fingers until the ink smudged. My heart whispered the truth I had been avoiding. Sometimes, love doesn't die with distance. It just changes its direction. And yet, despite everything, I still waited. Every phone call, every knock at the door, I still hoped it would be him, smiling, saying, "Ma, let's have tea like old times." But the calls came less and less, until they almost stopped altogether. And I learned the hardest lesson a mother can ever learn. That sometimes, love demands silence, even when your heart is screaming. The day everything broke, it started like any other. Ordinary. Quiet. Deceptively peaceful. I had woken up early, as usual. The winter sun was just slipping through the lace curtains, painting soft golden lines across the room. The kettle whistled in the kitchen, the smell of chai leaves filling the air. That smell always reminded me of Arav as a boy, sitting cross-legged on the floor, doing his homework while I read the newspaper beside him. Now, the other side of the table was empty. It had been nearly 5 months since I'd seen him last. He stopped calling regularly, one message here, another there, small updates that didn't mean much. But that morning, something inside me said enough. I couldn't live on fragments anymore. I needed to see my son. So I packed a small box of sweets, wrapped a shawl around myself, and took the metro to his new apartment. I didn't tell him I was coming. I wanted to surprise him. Or maybe, deep down, I just wanted to see if he would look happy to see me. When I reached the building, the security guard recognized me. "Madam, you are Mr. Kapoor's mother, right?" I smiled, yes. He nodded politely and called the flat. After a brief exchange, he said, "You can go up, madam, 4th floor." The elevator doors opened, and my heart began to race. I could already imagine the scene, Arev opening the door, shocked but happy, calling out, "Ma!" and then dragging me inside. Mira offering tea, maybe even smiling genuinely this time. I wanted that. I needed that. I knocked once. Twice. Then the door opened. It was Arev. It was Mira. She looked surprised for a moment, but not pleasantly so. "Oh, Auntie, you didn't call before coming." Her tone was polite, but cold, like the temperature outside. "I wanted to surprise you both," I said, forcing a smile. "Is Arev home?" "Yes," she said, stepping aside reluctantly. "Come in." I entered. The apartment was beautiful, modern, spotless, full of the kind of furniture I'd only seen in magazines. But what struck me most was how little of my son was in it. No family photos. No childhood things. Nothing that reminded me of where he came from. Arev emerged from the bedroom, startled. "Ma, what are you doing here?" I smiled, holding up the sweet box. "You didn't visit, so I thought I'd come to you. You've made such a beautiful home, Beta." He looked nervous, glancing at Mira. "You should have called Ma." "I wanted to surprise you," I repeated softly. "Is that so wrong?" No, of course not," he said quickly, but his voice lacked warmth. "It's just unexpected." I sat down on the couch. The silence between us felt heavy, awkward. I tried to ease it. "So, when are you both planning the wedding ceremony? The traditional one? You promised me there would be one, remember?" Mira's expression changed instantly, like a curtain had dropped. She exchanged a look with Arev, one that made my stomach tighten. Then she said, her voice calm and flat, "We're already married, Auntie." I blinked, confused. Already married? But that was months ago, wasn't it? You said you did a court ceremony. I mean the proper one, the rituals, the family, the vows in front of God. She interrupted me. "No, Auntie, I meant recently. We did the full ceremony. Yesterday." Yesterday. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The room spun. "Yesterday," I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. "You had your wedding yesterday." She nodded without emotion. "Yes, just a small one, only close friends. We didn't want to make it a big deal." I looked at Arev. He wasn't meeting my eyes. His hands were clenched at his sides. "You got married again, properly, yesterday?" I asked him, my voice trembling. He swallowed hard. "Yes, Ma, it just happened suddenly. Mira's family arranged everything. We didn't want to bother you, it was small." "Bother me?" My voice cracked. "Arev, I am your mother. How could you get married without me there, without even telling me?" He said nothing. Absolutely nothing. Tears welled in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Was it because of her? I turned to Mira, unable to hold it in anymore. "Was it you who didn't want me there?" She drew in a slow breath. "Auntie, please don't make this about blame. It was just easier this way. There's too much drama in big weddings. We wanted peace." Peace? That word cut through me like glass. I laughed bitterly through tears. "Peace? You call excluding your own mother peace?" Arev finally looked at me then, his eyes full of guilt. "Ma, please don't make this harder than it is." "Harder?" I whispered. "Do you know what was hard? Hard was raising you alone when your father died. Hard was skipping meals so you could study abroad. Hard was waiting every night for your phone calls. This," I pointed at both of them, shaking, "this is betrayal, Arev, not peace, not simplicity, betrayal." He stepped forward, trying to hold my hand, but I pulled away. "Don't," I said sharply. "You've made your choice." The room went silent. I could hear my own heartbeat, heavy and uneven. Mira broke the silence. "Auntie, please understand, it wasn't meant to hurt you." I looked at her, calm, composed, untouched by the storm in front of her, and I realized something I hadn't before. She had never wanted me in their lives. Not really. I had always been an inconvenience. I turned back to my son. "You could have at least called me, Arev, just one phone call. I wouldn't have come if she didn't want me there. I would have respected it, but to find out like this." He opened his mouth, but no words came out. His face looked pale, small, like the boy who used to hide behind me when he broke a vase. Only this time, I couldn't protect him. He wasn't the same boy anymore. Finally, I said, "I'll go." He reached out again, Ma, please. No, I stepped back. You've made your life, Beta. You've built your home, you don't need me in it. I picked up my shawl and the unopened sweet box. The silence between us stretched like miles. As I walked to the door, Mira said quietly, Auntie, please don't take it personally. I turned to her, my voice trembling but sharp. There's nothing more personal than being erased from someone's life. And then I left. Outside, the winter air was cold enough to bite, but the ache inside me burned hotter than any wind. I walked slowly, every step heavier than the last. I didn't know where I was going, I just needed to move, to keep from collapsing right there on the pavement. By the time I reached home, the sun had set. I unlocked the door to silence, the kind that swallows you whole. I placed the box of sweets on the table. The label still said, for Arav. I stared at it for a long time, then pushed it away. I sat by the window again, watching the streetlights flicker on. My hands trembled as I poured myself tea, but I couldn't drink it. The lump in my throat was too heavy. That night, I didn't cry. I thought I would, but no tears came. Just a dull ache, a hollow emptiness that no amount of tears could fill. I went into Arav's old room. It still looked the same. His books, his posters, the medals he'd won as a boy. I sat on his bed and ran my hand over his pillow. The faint smell of him lingered, not from the man he'd become, but from the child I used to tuck in. And that's when the tears finally came. Not in loud sobs, but in quiet, broken gasps, the kind that shake your soul. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight hitting my face. My pillow was damp, my head ached, but worse than that, my heart did. I made breakfast out of habit, 2 cups of tea, 2 plates. Then I laughed at myself. 1 plate was enough now. Around noon, the phone rang. Arav. I hesitated, then picked up. Yes, Beta. Ma, his voice was small, fragile. Are you okay? I forced a smile he couldn't see. Of course, why wouldn't I be? I didn't mean for it to happen like that, he said quietly. It just got complicated. I should have told you. It's all right, I lied. You're married now, you have your responsibilities. Ma, please don't be upset. I'm not, I said softly. I'm proud of you, Arav. You've become everything your father would have wanted. My voice cracked. I just wish you'd let me stand beside you when you took your vows, that's all. There was silence on the other end. Then, softly, he said, I'm sorry, Ma. I smiled through tears. I know, Beta. After the call, I sat for a long time, staring at the half-empty cup of tea. My hands trembled slightly as I whispered to the empty chair across the table. I forgive you, my son, even if you never asked me to. That evening, as I stood on the balcony watching the city lights flicker, I realized something. Sometimes, betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from those who once promised to love you forever. And the saddest part is, you still love them anyway. The days after that confrontation were the longest of my life. Everything around me looked the same rooms, the same routines, the same chair by the window, but inside, something had died. The silence of the house no longer comforted me, it accused me. Every corner whispered his name. Every photograph felt like a ghost staring back. For weeks, I didn't hear from Arav, not a single call, not a message. It was as if that day had erased me completely from his world. I stopped checking my phone. I stopped cooking properly. I'd make tea, drink half, and pour the rest down the sink. There's something cruel about waiting. It eats you alive quietly. I would wake up every morning telling myself not to think of him, not to check my phone, not to hope. But hope has a mind of its own. It hides under your ribs, whispering lies like, maybe today. But today never came. It was mid-January when I finally fell ill. At first, I ignored it, just a fever, I told myself. But soon, it became worse. My body ached, I couldn't keep food down, and some nights I'd wake up gasping, drenched in sweat. I called Arav once, he didn't pick up, left a message. The next day he replied, busy with meetings, Ma, rest well, I'll come on the weekend. He didn't. That weekend, I ended up fainting in the kitchen. When I opened my eyes, I was in a hospital bed, the white ceiling spinning above me, an IV needle in my arm. A nurse leaned over and smiled kindly. You're lucky your neighbor found you when she did. I wanted to smile back, but my lips wouldn't move. Lucky. I didn't feel lucky, I felt abandoned. 2 days later he came, Arav. He stood by the door, guilt written across his face. Ma. My eyes filled instantly. He looked tired, his hair disheveled, eyes sunken. You came, I whispered. Of course I came, he said, sitting beside me. I didn't know it was this bad. I wanted to scold him, to tell him he should have known. But when I saw the worry in his eyes, all the anger melted away. Love is a strange thing. It forgives even before it understands. I smiled weakly. I'm okay now, don't look so worried. He took my hand gently. I should have been here sooner. I'm sorry, Ma. My eyes burned. It's all right, Beta, you're here now. He stayed that night, sitting by my bed, checking my temperature every hour like I used to when he was a child. Watching him do that, caring for me like I once cared for him, broke something inside me. For a moment, it felt like the old days again. The way he adjusted my blanket, the way he whispered, "Sleep, Ma, I'm here." But deep down, I knew it wouldn't last. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of soft footsteps. Mira had come. She looked uncomfortable, holding a bouquet of flowers. "Hello, Auntie," she said, placing them on the table. I smiled faintly. "Thank you for coming." She nodded, avoiding my eyes. "I'm sorry to hear about your health." "It happens with age," I said. "I've learned not to expect too much from this body anymore." There was silence. Arev came in with tea, trying to lighten the air. "Let's not talk about age, Ma. You'll outlive us all." I laughed softly. "Maybe, but I don't want to, not if it means watching everything I love walk away." The words slipped out before I could stop them. The room went still. Mira looked up, guilt flickering across her face. Arev looked down, his fingers tightening around the cup. "Ma," he began softly, but I stopped him. "It's all right, you don't have to explain anymore." Tears stung my eyes, but I blinked them away. "You both have your life. I've had mine. I just wish the two didn't have to be so far apart." Mira finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Auntie, I never wanted to hurt you." I looked at her, and for the first time I saw it not arrogance, not coldness, but fear. Fear of not being accepted. Fear of sharing him. I sighed. "You did hurt me, Mira. But I think I hurt you too, by trying to hold on to someone who no longer belonged only to me." Her eyes softened, and for the first time she called me something she never had before. Ma. That word, simple, small, but so heavy, cracked me open. I reached for her hand. "You don't need to call me that to make me happy, just don't keep him away from me." Tears filled her eyes. She nodded silently. Arev stood between us, his eyes glistening. "Ma, I'm so sorry. I don't know how I let it come to this." I smiled weakly. "You were just living, Beta. You can't blame yourself for growing up. I just wish I'd learned to let you go sooner." I was discharged 2 days later. Arev stayed with me for a few nights. He cooked dinner badly and laughed when I teased him about it. For the first time in years, the house felt alive again. On the last night before he left, we sat by the window, sharing tea. The same spot we'd shared 1,000 evenings before. He said quietly, "Ma, do you ever regret not remarrying?" I smiled. "No, I had you, that was enough." He looked down, his voice barely a whisper. "You gave up your whole life for me." "I didn't give it up," I said softly. "I chose it, and I'd choose it again, even knowing how it ends." He didn't speak after that. He just leaned his head on my shoulder like he used to as a child. We sat like that until the city outside went quiet. After they left, I went back to my quiet routines, tea, temple, television. But something was different now. The pain was still there, but it wasn't sharp anymore. It was dull, familiar, like a scar that still aches when it rains. They called more often after that. Mira would even talk sometimes, tell me small things about her day. I could tell she was trying, and I was learning to be content with that. But there were still moments when I'd set 2 plates for dinner out of habit. Moments when I'd reach for my phone just to hear his voice. Moments when I'd stand by the window waiting for footsteps that never came. Grief doesn't vanish when you forgive. It just learns how to breathe beside you. A few months later, I was invited to their house for the first time. The same apartment where I'd once been told I didn't belong. I almost said no, but Arev insisted. "Please, Ma, Mira really wants you to come." When I arrived, Mira greeted me with a warm smile and a hug. "We've been waiting for you," she said. "The house finally feels complete." Her words caught me off guard. For the first time, I believed she meant them. The apartment was beautiful, not because of the furniture, but because it finally had something it hadn't before: warmth. There were family photos on the wall now, and among them, one of me, a picture from Arav's graduation day. I stopped in front of it, my throat tightened. "You kept this," I whispered. Arav smiled gently. "Of course I did, Ma. You were there for every beginning I've ever had. I want you in this one too." I looked at him, my son, the man he'd become, and for a moment I saw both versions of him together. The boy who used to hold my hand, and the man now holding someone else. That evening, when I returned home, I sat by the window as always. The city lights flickered in the distance. My heart felt heavy, but not broken. I realized something then: love doesn't end just because it changes. Sometimes it transforms quietly, asking you to accept it in new forms. Still, I whispered to the night, "I miss you, Arav, not the man you are now, but the boy who needed me." The wind moved through the curtains softly, as if it understood. And for the first time in a long while, I felt peace, not because everything was fixed, but because I'd finally accepted what couldn't be. But deep down, I also knew this peace was fragile. Because no matter how much love returns, once it's been broken, it never fits the same way again. There comes a point when your body becomes honest before your heart does. It starts to break down, quietly, without asking permission, long before your mind is ready to let go. It began one morning, months after that fragile peace had returned between us. I woke up with a strange heaviness in my chest. It wasn't pain exactly, more like something pressing from the inside. I brushed it off, thinking it was just age or maybe the weather. But by evening, the breathlessness had grown worse. I tried to stand up, but the room spun. My fingers trembled as I reached for the phone. The last thing I remember before collapsing was the sound of it ringing, Arav's name flashing on the screen. When I opened my eyes again, the world was white. White ceiling, white walls, white sheets, the steady beep of a machine beside me. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming, that I had slipped into some quiet space between life and memory. But then, through my blurry vision, I saw him. Arav. His head was resting on the edge of my bed, his hand clutching mine tightly. His eyes were red, his face unshaven, his lips moving in a silent prayer. I tried to speak, but only a whisper came out. "Arav." His head shot up instantly. "Ma," he breathed, tears spilling over. "You're awake." He took my hand and pressed it to his forehead like he used to as a child. "Don't scare me like that again, please." I smiled weakly. "How long?" "2 days," he said, voice trembling. "You fainted at home. The doctor said it was your heart. You need rest." I looked at him, my chest tightening again, not from illness this time, but from emotion. His eyes were full of love and fear and guilt. "I'm fine," I whispered. "Don't cry, Beta." He laughed through his tears. "You always say that, even when you're not fine." "That's what mothers do," I said softly. "We lie so our children don't worry." He shook his head, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry, Ma, for everything, for not being there, for not calling, for..." I placed my trembling hand on his cheek. "SHH, you don't have to say it." "No," he insisted, his voice shaking. "I do. You were right. I left you alone. I chose silence when I should have stood beside you. I thought I was protecting you, but I was just running away from the guilt of what I'd done." His words cut through me, sharp and heavy. I tried to smile. "You were building your life, Arav. That's not wrong." "It's not just that," he said, gripping my hand tighter. "Mira didn't want a big wedding, and I agreed, but I should have fought for you. I should have told her you deserved to be there. I should have told her," his voice cracked completely, "that nothing in my life would have existed without you." My throat closed, the tears came quiet and slow. "Arav." He leaned forward, resting his forehead on my hand. "I've been so blind, Ma. I thought growing up meant moving away. I thought love meant choosing one person. But I forgot, I only learned how to love because of you." My heart felt like it was breaking all over again, not from pain, but from the unbearable sweetness of hearing what I had longed to hear for years. I brushed his hair with my fingers. "You didn't forget love, Beta. You just learned it differently." He lifted his head, his eyes full of tears. "Can you forgive me?" I smiled faintly, the kind of smile that comes from years of tears finally finding their place. "A mother doesn't forgive, Arav. She just waits until her child remembers her again. He began to sob then, real, shaking sobs that came from somewhere deep inside him. I hadn't seen him cry like that since he was a boy. I held him, weakly but firmly, and for a long time neither of us spoke. The hospital faded away. The beeping, the nurses, the white walls, they all disappeared. There was only us. A mother and her son. Two people who had lost each other and somehow found their way back, not in joy, but in sorrow. Later that evening, Mira arrived. She looked pale and anxious, holding a thermos and some food. The moment she saw me awake, she rushed forward. "Ma, thank God you're okay." The word Ma came out naturally this time, not forced, not out of guilt. Just softly, like it belonged there. I smiled at her. "You came." "Of course," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "Arav, been here since you were admitted. He hasn't slept in 2 days. I was so scared." I looked at her, really looked, and saw the exhaustion on her face, the fear behind her eyes. She wasn't my enemy. She was just a young woman who'd been as lost as I was, trying to build a home out of love and mistakes. I reached for her hand. "Sit, Beta." She sat beside me, holding my hand tightly. "You scared us." "I scare myself these days," I said with a faint laugh. She smiled through her tears. "You can't leave us, Ma, not yet." Arav, standing by the bed, said softly, "We've both been so foolish. She thought you didn't like her. You thought she didn't want you. And I didn't try hard enough to bring you both together." I turned to Mira. "I never disliked you. I was just afraid." Her brow furrowed. "Afraid?" "Yes," I whispered. "Afraid of being replaced. Afraid of losing my son to a new life that didn't need me. I see now that it wasn't your fault. It was just life moving forward, and I was standing still." Tears slipped down her cheeks. She leaned forward and hugged me, the kind of hug that says everything words can't. "I'm so sorry, Ma." I closed my eyes, resting my chin on her shoulder. "SHH, no more apologies. Let's start over." Arav placed his hand over ours. "A new beginning," he said softly. For the first time, we felt like a family, not perfect, not healed, but together. The following days blurred into gentle rhythms of recovery. Arav stayed in the hospital most nights, sometimes dozing off in the chair beside me. Mira would bring breakfast in the mornings, read the newspaper aloud, laugh softly at small things. We talked, really talked, for the first time. About my life, about hers, about how love changes shape with time. She told me how scared she'd been of not being accepted, how she mistook my silence for judgment. I told her how I mistook her quiet for rejection. We both cried and laughed at the absurdity of it. One evening, Arav sat by my bed, watching the sunset through the glass window. "Do you remember, Ma," he said, "when we used to sit by the window during the rains and count lightning?" I smiled. "You always cheated. You'd say you saw one before I did." He laughed quietly. "I didn't cheat. I just wanted you to laugh when you were tired." The sun bathed the room in a soft orange glow. For a moment, time stopped. He took my hand again. "Ma, promise me you'll take care of yourself now. I can't lose you." I looked at him with a faint smile. "You can't lose what's already inside you, Arav. No matter where you go, I'll always be there." He shook his head, tears glistening. "Don't say that like you're leaving." "I'm not leaving," I whispered. "Just resting. Sometimes love needs rest too." That night, I dreamt of his childhood, of small hands clutching mine, of laughter echoing through the old apartment, of nights we spent reading stories by candlelight during power cuts. I woke up smiling, even though my body felt weaker. When the doctor came for his morning round, his expression was grave. "You need to be careful," he said gently. "No stress, no overexertion." Arav nodded, determined. "I'll take her home. I'll make sure of it." I looked at him, this man who once was my whole reason to live, and felt a quiet pride. "You don't need to, Beta," I said softly. "You already gave me what I needed." He frowned. "What's that?" "Your heart back." They took me home that weekend. Mira arranged the house like a nurse, warm blankets, soft music, my favorite flowers near the bed. Arav cooked every meal, clumsily but with love. I could see how much he was trying to make up for lost time. One evening, I watched them laughing together in the kitchen, flour on their hands, teasing each other, burning chapatis, and I realized something profound. I wasn't losing him. I never had. I was just learning to share him with someone else who loved him too. And that realization brought peace. That night before going to bed, I called Arav and Mira into my room. They sat on either side of me. I looked at both of them, my heart full, my eyes tired but calm. "I want to tell you something," I said softly. "I'm proud of you both. You found love, you built a home, and now you've brought me back into it. I couldn't ask for more." Arav took my hand. "You're the heart of this family, Ma." I smiled. "No, Beta, I'm just the roots. The tree belongs to you now." He shook his head. "It'll always be yours." I looked at both of them, tears blurring my vision. "Just promise me one thing, don't forget to call, even when life gets busy. A mother doesn't need much, just a voice that reminds her she's still remembered." They both nodded, holding my hands tightly. As the lights dimmed and the night deepened, I whispered one last thought to myself, a truth that had taken me a lifetime to understand. Love doesn't always stay beside you. Sometimes it walks ahead, but it always leaves footprints you can follow, even in the dark. Time moves differently when you start measuring it in memories instead of minutes. After the hospital, life slowed down, not because I wanted it to, but because my body demanded it. I woke up later, moved slower, spoke less. The house felt gentler now, not haunted, not lonely, just quiet in a way that didn't hurt as much anymore. Arav and Mira began visiting regularly. Every Sunday, without fail. They would come early, sometimes bringing groceries, sometimes just themselves. Arav would help fix things around the house, squeaky doors, old bulbs, a leaking faucet, while Mira would sit beside me and chat about her week. At first, I thought they were just doing it out of guilt, but slowly, I realized they were doing it out of love. Real love. The kind that doesn't need to be spoken out loud anymore. And slowly, I began to heal, not just in body, but in heart. One afternoon, as we sat drinking tea, I looked at them and smiled. "You both remind me of your father and me," I said quietly. Arav looked up. "Really?" I nodded. He used to make the same face when I scolded him, that guilty but pretending to be innocent look. They both laughed. The sound filled the room like sunlight. Mira reached for my hand. "Tell us about him, Ma. You never talk much about your husband." I hesitated for a moment, then smiled softly. "Your father was a good man. Quiet, strong, kind. He never said much, but when he did, you listened. We didn't have much, just dreams and a few pieces of furniture, but we were happy. And when he died, it felt like the sky fell. I didn't think I could survive it." Arav's eyes glistened. "You did." I looked at him. "I did because I had you." He lowered his gaze. "I wish I'd understood that sooner." I shook my head. "You weren't supposed to. Children aren't meant to understand their parents right away. It takes life and mistakes to teach that." There was silence for a while, the kind that feels like a warm blanket. Then Mira said softly, "You know, Ma, I never really had this growing up. My parents were together, but they weren't close. Our home was quiet in the wrong way. I didn't know how to handle closeness, so I built walls instead." I squeezed her hand gently. "And you spent years behind them." She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "Yes, and I think Arav did too. I guess that's why we hurt you, not because we wanted to, but because we didn't know how not to." Her honesty broke me in the most beautiful way. I reached out and touched her face. "You've learned now, that's all that matters." She leaned forward and hugged me. It wasn't a polite hug anymore, it was warm, real, trembling. "I love you, Ma," she whispered. I closed my eyes, letting those words sink in. "I love you too, Beta." The years began to fold gently into one another. Seasons passed quietly, winter shawls, summer mangoes, the smell of rain on old tiles. Arav and Mira would still come every Sunday. They'd stay for lunch, sometimes for dinner too. We talk, laugh, watch old movies. It wasn't the same kind of happiness I once dreamed of: loud celebrations, big family gatherings, constant company. No, this was quieter, softer, but it was real. Sometimes that's enough. One evening, Arav arrived alone. It was raining heavily outside, thunder rolling across the sky. He was drenched, holding something under his jacket. "Ma, guess what?" he said, smiling breathlessly. I raised an eyebrow. "You're soaked, that's what." He laughed and handed me a small envelope. "Know this." Inside was an ultrasound photo. I stared at it, confused for a moment before realizing what it was. My hands began to tremble. "Is this?" I whispered. He nodded, his eyes shining. "You're going to be a grandmother, Ma." My breath caught, the room tilted slightly. A sound escaped my throat, half laugh, half sob. "A grandmother." He knelt beside me, hugging me tightly. "We wanted to tell you first." My tears fell freely. "Oh, Arav," I cupped his face in my hands. "This is the best gift you could ever give me." He smiled, but his eyes glistened. "You've waited long enough for happiness, Ma. It's your turn now." From that day, my world filled with anticipation again. Every conversation revolved around the baby, names, colors, clothes. Mira would call every evening to give updates, doctor visits, cravings, baby kicks. When the day finally came, Arav called me at dawn. His voice was trembling with joy. "It's a girl, Ma." "A girl?" "My granddaughter." When I held her for the first time, my hands shook. She was tiny, wrapped in pink, her face soft and new, her eyes closed like she was still dreaming. I felt something in my chest, something pure, something whole, like the universe had given me back everything I'd lost in one small heartbeat. I whispered to her, "You'll never know how much love brought you here." Arav smiled from beside me. "We're naming her Anya." "Anya," I repeated softly. "It means caring, doesn't it?" He nodded, "Yes, like you." I laughed through tears. "Then she'll carry my heart in her name." The next few years became the best chapter of my life. Anya became my new reason to wake up. Her laughter filled the house like sunlight breaking through old clouds. She'd run through the rooms, her tiny feet echoing on the floor, her little voice calling, "Daddy, Daddy." Every time she said that word, something in me healed a little more. She had her father's eyes, but her soul, her softness, her stubbornness, her way of loving too deeply, that was mine. I told her stories every night, stories about her father as a little boy, about her grandfather, about dreams, about mistakes, about love. Sometimes she'd fall asleep halfway through, her hand clutching mine, and I'd just watch her breathe, thinking how beautiful it was, this continuation of life, this second chance love had given me. But nothing lasts forever, not even peace. One winter morning, I woke up and felt that same heaviness in my chest again, only this time it didn't fade. I knew, my body knew. I didn't tell Arav right away. I didn't want to scare him. I just wanted time, a few more sunsets, a few more cups of tea, a few more stories for Anya. When it became harder to hide, I called them over. We sat together in the living room, me, Arav, Mira, and little Anya playing on the carpet. I said quietly, "Promise me something." Arav frowned. "What promise?" "When I'm gone," I said softly, "don't let this house stay empty. Let it stay alive with laughter, with her footsteps. Let her know she had a grandmother who loved her more than her own life." "Ma, don't talk like that," Arav said, his voice trembling. Mira's eyes filled. "You're not going anywhere." I smiled. "Everyone goes somewhere eventually, but love doesn't, it stays." Anya looked up at me, curious, too young to understand the weight of the moment. She climbed into my lap and touched my face with her tiny hands. "Daddy, don't cry." I hugged her tightly, my tears falling into her hair. "No, my love, Daddy?" Not crying, Daddy's just full. A few days later, I fell asleep and didn't wake up for a while. When I opened my eyes, I saw the same white walls, the same machines, the same tired faces beside me. Arav held my hand, whispering, "We're here, Ma, we're all here." Mira was on the other side, her head resting on the bed, holding my arm. Little Anya sat on her lap, staring at me with wide, confused eyes. I smiled weakly, "All of you together." Arav leaned closer, "Always." I tried to speak, but my voice was faint. "Promise me one more thing, Beta." "Anything." "Don't let guilt live in this house anymore, only love." He nodded, tears streaming. "I promise." I reached for Mira's hand next. "You've made him happy, that's all I ever wanted." She pressed my hand to her heart. "You made us a family." Then I looked at my granddaughter, my little light. "Anya," I whispered, "when you grow up, love loudly, forgive easily, and never let silence steal your people from you." Her tiny fingers squeezed mine, as if she understood. And in that moment, I felt peace, not because I was leaving, but because I finally knew love had come full circle. They said I passed away in my sleep that night, quietly, without pain, my hand still holding my granddaughter. But if souls can linger, I think mine stayed for a while. I saw them, Arav holding Mira, both of them crying. I saw Anya lighting a small dia near my photo years later, whispering, "Good night, Daddy." And I smiled. Because in the end, love didn't vanish. It simply changed homes. If someone were to ask me what my life was about, I'd tell them this. It was about love that gave everything, lost everything, and still found its way back. I once asked when the wedding was, and my daughter-in-law told me, "We got married yesterday." That sentence broke me. But now, years later, I understand, it wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of learning what love truly means. Love isn't about being chosen first. It's about choosing to stay, even after the world forgets you. And if you ever listen closely, maybe on a rainy night, you might hear a mother's whisper carried through the wind. A mother's love never dies, it just learns how to wait.